Welcome to a Leverage a Legacy here on the Wealth Movement TV, Wealth Learning TV channel. Wonderful to have you here with us today. And we're going to take a look at your next 50 transition. Find your way on your terms while smiling. So I want to unpack this notion of what is your next 50, what does transition mean, and what does it mean to find your way on your terms while smiling. And so I'm going to just unpack different elements of that as we move forward. Again, just please subscribe. That would be wonderful. And if you want to ring the bell, that's even better. So thank you very much for that. Now, where I'm going with this is based on my own history of finding myself past my next 50. I'm actually through the door and into it. And I am the co founder and now only founder of the Wealth Movement. And I'm bringing what I can to being for the world, with the planet, and from the whole. And to unpack all of this, I have started to take a look at this next 50 transition that everyone goes through. And what does it mean to find your way through that transition? Now, I have to share with you, I went through that next 50 doorway to start all of this, a little bit kicking and screaming about what was going on, with some ups and downs that went with it. I find myself now through that doorway and involved in a lot of really interesting projects, having a lot of fun doing what I'm doing, certainly not kicking and screaming anymore. Having to dig myself out of a few holes that I have created for myself. That makes it a little exciting sometimes. Sometimes you don't necessarily want to get up in the morning, and I think you might know what I'm talking about there, is finding that pathway that allows you to sort of feel as though, wow, this is really great, and I can enjoy all that's going to unfold. So some of what I'm going to share with you today comes from my own personal experience and having done some research and writing. That's a very core value of mine, is researching and writing and then sharing it through whatever educating approach I can find that works with the audience that I'm engaging with. And today it has a little bit of a flavor of instructing, and that's okay because I'm using the video here. But maybe there's comments you want to leave, and what I can do is do a little bit of, well, coaching or mentoring in terms of what you leave. Or you can certainly leave a comment to say, hey, can we get together, and we can take it from there as well. Again, just to remind you, if you go to wealthmovement.com/contact, there is a contact form there. You can leave your email and question. Oh, and just remember, WELLTH, WELLTH for Wealth Movement. So let's get into this. And I'm going to take a look. The first thing I'm going to take a look at is the term next 50. Now, you may have heard of second 50, second act, encore, third act, many different ways to sort of highlight this time in life where this notion of older is really starting to become present for you. And words like aging and ageism and fatigue that might be coming with that, and illnesses and injuries that you didn't have when you were a little bit younger, and now you find yourself years older. And just one thing I'll start with, I always talk about years young because that's how I see myself. And I would encourage you to think something like that as well as you start to talk about birthdays. Instead of 68 years old, I'm 68 years young, and see what that does for you, and unfold it. So this term next 50 is to take a look at 50, 55 plus. You're starting to look at the next 50 years of your life and what are you going to do with it. And this word transition pops up into that much more than what you might think when you are not entering your next 50, but you're in your first 50. You don't necessarily talk as much about it, or if you do, it has a certain kind of meaning. And that's what I want to take a look at now. I like to sort of look at this word trans first. Trans means to go across. And this notion of transferring, okay, to send something across. You're going to send it from here to there. And this notion of transportation, all right, to move goods from one place to another, you can get a sense of trans. So when you come up with the word transition, it's this notion of shift condition to another, this notion of looking at something before and after and what it is that you've done inside that before and after. So you can say the before might be A, the after might be C, the B is the transition, what took place in between using the ABC model. It's a easy way to take a look at it. Well, what I would offer to you at this point in time, while I'm going to speak about 3 types of transition that follow, I also want to make the point is that I sort of shared a little bit about it, is this notion of we don't think of transition until we get into a latter part of life, but actually transition that's happening throughout living our. We just don't necessarily see it that way. We might talk about, becoming a teenager and then moving into young adult and then moving into middle aged, and we have children or we get married or we get together. We find different kinds of jobs and move, and lots of transition, the move across takes place. But it seems transition picks itself up if you hear of things like life and career transition. And while important, I just want to emphasize that transition is happening all the time. But there are 3 types of transition, and that's what I want to take a look at next. The first one is transaction or transactional. And often we think of that word as having something to do with business, the transaction that we do, the money in, money out, that kind of idea. But it's also about an interaction between persons. So in some ways, I'm having a transaction with you now. You are sitting on your end watching the video I'm sharing. There's a bit of a transaction that's taking place, even if it's only for your viewing entertainment. Maybe you pick up something here that's of interest and that leads you to take some kind of action. There's a bit of a transaction that is taking place here. So there is some exchange of something that's taking place. And I like to think of a transaction as really about being for the world and how we interact with one another, with our kin, with humanity. Is there are transactions that are taking place through conversations that we have with one another. And sometimes that can be a bit of a slow flow as I sort of look at it. It's there's a flow that's taking place. Flow is that sort of the connection between the challenges and the competence that we have when we're interacting with one another. And often there is a bit of a slowness to, and we need to look at it as though it's something that can be a benefit. There is this exchange, there's a benefit that's taking place. And I think you would agree with me as some transactions have a hindrance to them, and some transactions have a help to them. And they just happen all the time. But as you move into your next 50, I think, again, you might agree with me, is that you're looking for more of the help transactions because life's getting too short to put up with all the nonsense and the noise that might take place. So that's looking at transaction from a transition point of view, to move across, to go across. The next transition that is available to you is transformation or transformational transition. And this has a bit more of a dramatic shift to it, in appearance in particular. But as you are involved in it, there's a lot more energy that takes place. And it's often has something to do with renewal, alterations, makeovers, these kind of elements, because in some ways you are moving across the formation, you're shifting the formation of what might be there. So from a transformational point of view is getting into a deeper relationship. There's a transformation that takes place. If you find yourself involved with a new project, you may have to transform the way in which you interact with other people, because maybe you move from being a manager to a leader. This notion of going into your next 50, there's a transformation that takes place, because you might use another word like, and I don't use it very often, but this notion of retirement. It's moving into this next 50, this transformation that you might go through. And I sort of think of this as flow. There is this, again, it's this notion of competence and challenge meet, but there's a sense of being in flow, is that it's something that's so enjoyable if you embrace it that way, that time and space seem to go away in a sense, and you're enjoying what's taking place. Now, again, I can appreciate for some transformation as maybe you're exiting a relationship, and there's a transformation of not being together to being separate. I understand. But again, if one looks at that, you might find the beauty, the aesthetics, the inspiration, the enthusiasm that might be in that transformation that you may not see at first, but it's there, and is to find ways to embrace it and to weave it into your life. The third form of transition is transcendence or transcendent. And this is an interesting one, because it's one that often has you experience outside of the physical. While transformation is shifting the form, transcendence or transcendent way of going about transition is sort of involved more of what's going on around you. So outside of the physical, and you might go, it certainly exceeds your usual results, and you're tapping into other ways in which to be for the world, with the planet, and from the whole. And it sort of goes outside of what is your known and what you've experienced, and it gives you new possibilities to access more. One of the ways that I often talk about it is you go to some place that you don't even know where you're going. And I know, even when I've done managing and leading and interacting with others, sometimes we go through a transcendent experience, and we go together to some place we didn't know we were going to go. And that in itself has been very helpful for me as an entrepreneur, is to be open to that kind of transcendent transition, to experience that, and get outside of my known and my results as I have them now, to get newer outcomes. I'm going through something at the moment, and I've had to go back to what I call a beginner's mind. I mean, go back's not the best phrasing, is to go to a beginner's mind and suspend all of the ways in which I have experience the world or interact with the world as an entrepreneur, and in many ways start over, to go through a transcendent experience, to go places I've not gone before. And just to let you know, that has and is very exciting for me. And I'm learning lots and lots as I go through that, just as I would hope it would happen for you as well. From a flow perspective, I'll put a word like deep in front of it. It's a deeper connection with challenge and competence. And to do it with uh, this eyes open, all right? And I just want to share with you that there's something about how transition highlights the where and when of your learning. We sometimes get caught in this notion of time and space, this when and where, and don't really pay attention to it, but yet we're experiencing it all the time. We all have the same amount of time, and we can experience different spaces with that time. And if you've ever thought about that, there's something there about the transitions that you go through, is that in that time and space, it may be transactional, it may be transformational, it might be transcendent. And that's what I meant about it's happening all the time. We just don't necessarily look at it through this transition lens. Uh, but this notion of stepping forward, moving across, going across, we are in this movement all the time. And if you were to bring this transition lens to that, you might find that it's really a wonderful way to look at it. So, a term that I'll sometimes use is finding your way or wayfinding. And in finding your way, there's lots of factors that you can take into consideration. I'm just going to list a few here, and I'll do it not quickly, but so you get a chance to just do a quick reflection, touch each of these words. So there's this notion of finding your way from a physical perspective, say walking versus running. The mental is using your thoughts and being open to other ways in which thoughts come in. Your soul, this connection with soul, the spiritual connection that you have. Maybe it might be through a religious intention, or it might be through other ways in which you believe. A word that I'm coining as whole versical is looking at the whole and looking at what's going on, is reaching out into the galaxy and finding out what's going there, just as you might go into the quantum physics, into the small connection. There's other things like the social connections you have with family and friends, and therefore family is an aspect there as well, and this immediate group of people that you interact with. There's your vocational and financial. Vocational could be the career you have and your work colleagues. And the financial is where are you in your status of wealth creation, WEALTH. And where are you with that, and how much effort do you want to put into it? Then there's this notion of the emotional and your feelings component, and what's happening there for you, the transition that takes place because of emotions and the feelings that you draw from those emotional transitions that you go through. Then there's the social cultural, that bigger picture of being with others in this notion of world. The interactions that you have with technology, the interactions with economy and the economic factors, the politics that you're interacting with. Then there's this notion of the environmental, this whole aspect of for the world with the planet from the whole, this environmental aspect and the ecology, that this notion of your study of your living interactions with the environment being of the living and the non-living and all that's going on. So there's lots and lots of transition that's taking place, and you have transactions with those, transformations with those, transcendence with those. So I just listed them and briefly just bring them to your attention so that you might go, oh, okay, there's a lot here that maybe more than I had thought about as I'm going along in my next 50 and finding my way. But what I thought I would do now is just highlight this notion of wayfinding, finding your way. And I'm going to do it through some metaphors. I thought this might be a great way to sort of connect you and your finding your way or your wayfinding. And the very first one that I would go over is that I've been sharing videos about older, elder, mentor. And I'll put links to them and to the Loverage Legacy series so that you can go back and listen to them. I was talking about the convergence of older, the realization of elder, and the potentiality of mentor. So I'll put some links to those. But what becomes interesting is from a wayfinding point of view, and I mentioned earlier in this video, this notion as you become more aware of the status of older, that's, I think, all right, when one of those times, one of those spaces where finding your way becomes very, very evident for you. And so I sort of think of wayfinding and older, so that as you then look at older and you say, well, older, elder, how might I realize the status, the self caring aspect of elder? And when you do that, I believe what you do is you create a causeway. So think of it as you're connecting your older aspects of your life through elder, this causeway, this moving across this wettish kind of area, this muddy, murky kind of area. You build a causeway and you use it to walk across, and you look at what is causing things happening in your life and what might you do to cause things to happen in your life. And I have a fun way of looking at that, is that there is what's called a causal and a casual way of looking at things. And really all it is moving the S on either side of the U. So the shift that you're looking for, are you the cause of the shift, or are you in relationship with others who are causing some shift in you? And it might be casually through the interactions that you're going through. So playing with the words, if it works for you, that's great. Okay. Now, as you are doing this causeway, think about it as a way to get to this door, a doorway that has an archway. There, you're looking at the doorway archway, and you're about to walk up the steps to it and knock on that door. But what's the key that opens that door? And I would like to suggest that's where mentor comes in, because mentor is where you are sharing the gift of your lived experience with others. And it's sort of like the key that opens that doorway. You've crossed that causeway in your wayfinding across the causeway at the doorway that has this big archway. Use your mentor key to open that door, crack that door open. And that's how older, elder, mentor come together. And as you open that doorway, open that door, you crack it open. If you can get that feeling of cracking it open, what's in front of you? And that's where I started to play with, it could be a hallway into a building. Yeah, the door usually opens up and out you go. But guess what? The door might be you're inside the building, and opening the door is to bring you to a pathway. And the pathway may have a bit more of a nature component, a pathway into the forest versus a hallway down into a building. So again, the way that you open your door, what's there? Hallway, pathway. But guess what? You might actually find yourself looking at a highway, motorway. You're jumping in your vehicle and off you go. You might be in a railway and into a rail car. You might be at a runway and you're getting on your plane. So there are other ways in which to look at it. And I would offer to you is, for some, what they may see as they open that door is the Milky Way. There are days when I open up that door and I go into that transcendent approach and I go out into the Milky Way. I go out into that whole looking at what's happening, what can I experience, and bring that back to what's taking place. And that's why that mentor being the key is that if you find yourself along that pathway, guess what? You'll find yourself at another door that might open to the motorway, and that gets you to another door that opens up the Milky Way. That gets you into another door that opens up the pathway that opens up another, gets you to another. You see where I'm going? These different ways, this wayfinding, these different metaphors, these different experiences of living your life. So, really, what's happening here is that, like the Frank Sinatra, yes, Frank Sinatra had a song called My Way. And if I was to share with you, it's your way that you're going to bring all of these different wayfinding approaches to yourself, so that you create. If you say it to yourself, this is my way, right? I'm sharing with you in celebration of the your way. And when you are able to share that with others and share that from yourself, and to be able to move forward with this my way of living life, then you're onto something in this notion of your transition. All right, your next 50 transition, because that's what we're linking it to. And there's something here that I'd like to share to anchor here, is that when you are finding your way and moving along your way, do so where you're understanding the words of those that you're interacting with. Because when you use their words, you touch their heart. If you're only using your words, the best you might do is touch their head. And therefore, your ways have to bring into consideration your interactions with others. But here is the caveat that I'd like to bring here. Make sure that the way in which you're interacting with others and moving forward while bringing their words in, is make sure it's on your terms. If you find yourself up against someone trying to convince you to do something that's not eco-ethically valuable to you, then hone into your, stay with your way forward and say no to it, and do it on your terms, because that's what is sort of touches your heart and gets your soul involved and gets your spirit involved with what's unfolding for you. So I just wanted to bring the notion of, yes, it's in their words, but it's on your terms. And that's why I just want to highlight that while mentoring is a key to that doorway, I believe that there are at least 10 keys to that doorway, what I call the 10 educating approaches. And each one of those keys opens up the door that may have a different hallway, a different pathway, whatever it might be. And as you lean into those educating approaches, there's certain ones that come from within you that are of greatest service to those that you interact with. There are some people who are great at coaching. I'll declare I'm not. I'm great at mentoring. I'm also great at facilitating and instructing, but I'm not necessarily the best at coaching or consulting or counseling. These are other educating approaches. And so I wrote a book about it that I'm actually going through an editing of, and I'll be bringing that out soon. So keep your eyes and ears open for that one. But the other aspect of this, as you move through this transition, this next 50 transition, and you're doing it with finding your way and on your terms, you'll notice in the title, it adds the phrase while smiling. And I just want to bring that to the foreground, because this notion of smiling is, I like to do as much as I can from a smiling point of view, because I think It's an outward way of really highlighting a couple of things about you. And for me, smiling is a way in which to show a conscious decision. I'm smiling because the decision I made, this conscious decision, is welling up from within me, and I'm sharing it with you about what it is that I'm going to be, have, and do. It also brings to the foreground wholeheartedness, being wholehearted, and bringing your whole heart to what is taking place for you. Not only your head, but your heart. Again, that notion of that deeperness of who you are. It also brings, for me, it brings a calmness. And because I'm smiling, I'm going, I can do this, and I can be calm in how I'm unfolding what I am unfolding with you. And I can do it from a place of being calm. Two other words that I would add to it. Let's see. I like to work in five. So I've mentioned the notion of the conscious decision, the wholeheartedness, calm. Let me add humble. This notion of humble approach. I don't have to keep saying all the things that I've done, all the places I have been. I can be humble and be there with you and interact with you and learn with you as we might share the form of transition. Because maybe I'm interacting with you through an educating approach. Maybe I'm managing or leading, whatever it might be. We may be experiencing transaction, transformation, transcendence together. And that would be really wonderful. And to do that from a humble perspective, a humble inquiry, that's sort of touches very much my heart, this notion of wholeheartedness. And then the last word that I would probably put here is patience. Now, this one's an interesting one, is that I linked two other words with it: patience, flexibility, and discretion. And where that came from is that years ago, I found myself in a war zone situation where I was driving around and encountering roadblocks with soldiers at them. And the soldiers, if they were present during the day, it meant you stopped, especially if there was a pile of rocks in the middle of the road. At night, if you didn't see anything, you basically sped through. But during the day, if pile of rocks, soldiers were there, you stopped. And this one day, we stopped. I rolled down my window. I had a driver with me. And the soldier walked up and pointed the machine gun, and it came through the window and just brushed the tip of my nose. And the soldier was asking questions, not in a language I understood. So I was interpreting through my interpreter at the time. But I was also thinking, wow, this is quite the interesting situation, answering the questions. And at one point, I went, hang on a minute, when is this gun loaded? And I just reached up and moved the barrel away from my nose, and it came back in front. And I said consciously, I moved it again, answering the questions, looking at the soldier. And then as I moved it, I noticed that it started to wobble a little bit, and I could hear laughter with the other soldiers in behind. And it came back, but there was a bit of a wobble going on, and I pushed it away. And this happened for about 3 minutes, this total interaction. And then the soldier said to the driver, okay, go on. And as we drove away, I looked in my side mirror, and I said to my driver, I said, how old was that soldier? And he said, well, I would guess she's about 15 or 16. Yes, I said she. I was in her workplace. I was interacting with her, and her attempting to do the best she could with what she was experiencing and to do the best in her capacity as a soldier. And yes, she was only probably 15, 16. This was unfortunately a time when soldiers could be that age, and interacting with her. And the reason the gun was wobbling was because the machine gun is quite heavy, and to keep it in a stationary position, it's not easy. And the soldiers laughing as if they saw the predicament that this young soldier was in, this young woman was in, and they were laughing at the situation. She was attempting to save face, do what she could. All these things are happening. I'm thinking, is the safety on, pushing the, all of this is happening in the span of about 3 minutes. So I called her my 3 minute mentor. And that is how I remember that situation. And it had its own effects on me as even today. But it was something that in many, many ways, there was a transaction, there was a transformation, there was a transcendence to that. Because at that point in time, having my driver share with me who she was, I said I would do whatever I can to not have a young woman, a young man pick up a weapon and point it at someone. Um, in other words, not to give up on your words and pick up a weapon instead. And so I created the wealth movement, and I shoot videos like this to be able to help people understand about this way forward, this way finding, and this notion of transition. Because again, as I shared, there was a transaction, there was a transformation, there was a transcendence that took place in that 3 minutes about what I'm talking about here. If you go back and listen to the video again, all the different variables that I shared with you, all the different things that happened to me, all the different places I went in time and space in that 3 minutes is what I'm sharing with you at this point in time. And you have your own stories, you have your own life examples of that. And I celebrate all of those with you. I celebrate this notion of being an older, celebrate you and being an elder, celebrate you being a mentor as a key to all these ways that you can move forward. I celebrate all of that with you. And I encourage you to weave you into all of the other interactions that you have with others and help them see the way, how to help you see your way. And again, if I can be of service somehow, ask a question, comment. If there's a way that you want to get involved with some of the things that I'm doing, wealthmovement.com/contact. You can get a hold of us that way. So again, thank you for listening in on this one about your next 50 transition and find your way on your terms while smiling, even in those situations where, ooh, what's going on here? But at the end of it, in the middle of it, at the beginning of it, just be you and find that way in which to be for the world, to be with the planet, and to be from the whole. Next week, we'll be taking a look at the educating approaches, and I'll expand on them a little bit more. I only touched on them here. And with that, I just wish you the best and take care.